welcome to Virtual Concert Hall's live music channel. My name is Chris Au, and I have with me the co-founder of Virtual Concert Halls, Dr. Anna Osmanskaya.
Hi everyone, great pleasure to see you. Hope you all had very restful and wonderful holidays. We're back exploring Beethoven.
We are back, and we will be your host for today's show. This is part 7 of the documentary of Beethoven Symphony No. 5, written and narrated by Lawrence Rapchak, created by New Media Productions Worldwide and Virtual Concert Halls, and produced by Architects of Music.
And I can't stress more how grateful we are for this wonderful collaboration, which was born out of our passion for connecting musicians and audiences in real-time musical performances and live programs from around the globe.
Well, we're about to slip back into it for Beethoven's most awesome scherzo to date, where we are reminded that his visionary powers extended to his use of the orchestra, in this case the low string section. There isn't a serious orchestra in the world today, more than 200 years later, that doesn't require cellists to play the second movement as part of their audition, or for the double basses to play this scherzo. Beethoven required the low-string instruments to expand their traditional limited role in the orchestra beyond what any players at the time were expected or able to do. But his imagination, years ahead of its time, would not allow him to do any less. And the scherzo's main theme is heard throughout played solely, meaning that as a solo group of instruments, by the cellos and basses. It's an astounding effect as they rise from the depths of the orchestra. A shadowy, eerie sound that connects once again with the somber, misty elements in the first and second movements. And that opening phrase is essentially a C minor triad. Until this. It's completed then by the violins and the winds, and cadences gently on the dominant G, but it's hushed and almost resigned, as the boldness of the first movement comes charging through now with the French horns and a new theme. Or is it? It's 3 short notes and 1 long, but they're all the same pitch. It's not that. It is this. A powerful, stern march, the melody all on G, but the harmonies alternating tonic and dominant. And when the unison horns divide into thirds, at that very moment the bass descends to A flat. So we get this briefly. Appoggiatura, I love it. Moving now into E flat minor, which is a third higher than what we just heard, doubling the intensity. Beethoven now extends the march with this. These heavy accents. Now it fades, leaving us in B flat minor, a full step lower than the opening C minor, and a reappearance now of the ghostly cello bass theme. And we proceed as before, but in B flat minor. And I have to stop for a moment now because this passage signals another major advance by Beethoven in symphonic writing. We know that the symphonic scherzo, like its forerunner, the minuet, is structured in 3 basic parts. Scherzo, a central trio section, scherzo repeated. And we've also seen that the main scherzo, the first third, is itself in two parts. In Beethoven's Fourth Symphony, this is the first part. It's 20 measures long, and it ends with, then it all repeats. Literally. Then we go on to the second part, which is longer than the first part. It's more involved, but it ends like so. And this second part is also repeated before we go on to the central trio. And this was absolutely the norm in symphonic architecture, that both sections of the opening scherzo were repeated verbatim, note for note. The composer merely wrote in the repeat sign in the music to indicate that the orchestra play both sections twice. It was an essential part of the balance and proportion of the scherzo form. And here in the Fifth Symphony, Beethoven will honor this tradition, sort of, because he's at a point in his own development that maybe this literal repeat thing is too limiting, too formulaic. It doesn't allow him to expand the scherzo like the other movements. So at this point that we left the scherzo, we had moved into the lower key of B flat minor. And now what would normally be a literal repeat of the scherzo from the beginning in C minor now stays in B flat minor. Very mysterious. Then it will shift back to C minor, the main key. Like so on the dominant G. And Beethoven takes this, he lowers it to this, and he uses it to expand as it climbs and the volume increases. The march returns, and it moves now to the key of F minor. That secondary tonality from the first movement, making all of this higher and more intense. Again, the march fades, and Beethoven then takes the second phrase of the main theme, which is this, and he uses it to extend the scherzo. And this eerie gliding effect of this passage suddenly locks into a more distinct dance-like rhythm. And over it, the first violins lead with this. And this builds, including a few measures of this, which seem to recall the rhythm of three short notes. Well, maybe, maybe not. Then a final fortissimo statement of the horn march, and the main scherzo ends. This is a lot of detail, I know, but Beethoven pushed himself to compose all of this new material instead of taking the easy way out and simply repeating the second section of the scherzo. So here is the entire scherzo up to the trio section, and I'll call it out as it occurs, and it will all fall into place. The cello and bass rise. Here is the second phrase. The cello and bass again, extended slightly. And the horn march. It repeats in E flat minor. And it fades, but instead of repeating from the top, we stay in B flat minor for the repeat. And we wind our way back chromatically to the dominant G. And the march returns in C minor. Now it repeats in F minor. And once again, it fades, and it's now extended using the second phrase. Now it locks into dance rhythm. And the rapid four-note motive. And a powerful closing. And so, musical history has been made again. And now the trio, always lighter and more relaxed in nature, But not this time. Again, the cello and the basses are in the spotlight with another future audition excerpt, a dance-like trio that is boisterous, good-natured, it's in C major, and it's structured like a fugue. And this rugged new theme is built on rapid eighth notes. And this jolly sequence. And the violas and bassoons then enter in the dominant key of G. Exactly in the Baroque style. And this section will end with this. Sounds familiar, yes. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, maybe. Now, this trio does feature the traditional repeats, but even so, Beethoven continues to think in terms of continual development of his materials. So now the second section of the trio begins rather humorously with two false starts in the style of Haydn. They just stop, but the third time is the charm, and Beethoven uses this figure to extend the theme like so. And this robust trio theme gradually lightens and it ascends into the heights. And the woodwinds, in a seamless chain of G dominant seventh chord, descend back into the depths with an ominous A flat taken up by the cello and bass. And the Scherzo returns. So now, before we continue, I have two sidebars which I would like to share with you. You may want to hit pause and grab a beer. First, regarding Beethoven's four-note motive that powers the first movement, it seems that some form of this motive or its distinctive rhythm is present in the other three movements. The second movement's processional, the Scherzo's horn march, the trio, and we'll meet this rhythm again in the finale. Some people say that this similarity is significant and intentional, like Beethoven was leaving us little clues, a trail of breadcrumbs for us to discover centuries later. Some say that these similarities are not that special, that Beethoven did this sort of thing all the time. As I mentioned earlier, the Fourth Piano Concerto's first movement is built on the same rhythm. And in the same sketchbook that contains the Fourth Concerto and the Fifth Symphony, we also find what would become Beethoven's Opus 68. Impressions of the Countryside. And again, the theme starts with the same rhythm. Bum, three shorter notes, the same motive. But whether Beethoven planned or calculated any of this is not that important. But his widespread use of this motive is evidence of the way he thought, how he conceived music, that life force within him, how it manifested itself in the astounding range of musical expression that he could derive from the slightest, most insignificant rhythmic fragment. Da, 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 da. It's astounding.
It is astounding how Beethoven planted the seed for many later composers in using the leitmotif. But Christy...
Yeah, I think well, Larry really highlights something quite important, especially at the end, which I think is the genius of Beethoven, amongst many other things, which is that he takes the smallest little fragments, and we, as pianists, recognize this within our repertoire as well in the sonatas, how he takes little things and then he just works magic and creates incredible forms. He takes the idea of the scherzo, and I think he would be the one who popularized and revolutionized this form. into something more than just sort of a dance, into a real structure of which he could play with. I think it wasn't written as much then, so he really felt like he could expand upon it. And then, of course, now we have Chopin's Scherzi, and the form of Scherzo changed so much. It's really incredible how Beethoven really, especially in this documentary, we can see how he did so much to change and break the rules or expand the boundaries.
Yeah, I think that's the best description, expanding the boundaries of the pre-existing musical form to really encompass much bigger picture and much more involved development of a story in Beethoven's writing. And the scherzo, by the way, just for anyone who is interested what that strange word means, originally means a joke. Well, no joke. Beethoven Fifth Symphony Scherzo is not a joke.
Yeah,
it's actually a very dramatic story unfolding.
Absolutely, it's a banger. Like we watched the first and second movements, and we thought that, those are incredible pieces of music on its own. And then now you have the scherzo, and this scherzo in three, which he starts off with this incredibly mysterious and eerie feeling, and then that descends into a march. It's crazy when he puts it into context of what the music's about. I love what Larry does.
And Larry really points out and walks everyone through Beethoven's incredible strength in development. It's very well known to professional musicians because that's a high mark of Beethoven, that he was a minimalist in terms of what material he would originally use, and sometimes he even used folk tunes very freely without any copyright restrictions on them, or borrowed even themes from other composers. Imagine that. And then he takes something very minimalist and then develops it into incredibly rich stories with a lot of turns and twists and unexpected changes of the character. He actually derived that technique from Haydn. A lot of times people think of the progression of Viennese classical music, composers as Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, but Beethoven even himself stated that he derived the compositional techniques and learned them more from Haydn than much less so from Mozart. And we can see, Haydn wrote all those hundreds plus some symphonies, and everyone is probably familiar with the Surprise Symphony, where things take very unexpected turns musically. And so does Beethoven, even in this very short scherzo movement, just like what you pointed out and what Larry is really demonstrating so well in his narrative, how seemingly unrelated little mysterious opening develops and gets connected with the rest of the whole symphony. And I wanted to pivot back again to the leitmotif idea. Chris, if you can maybe just explain to people what it really means. What is the leitmotif?
Well, the leitmotif was popularized, I guess, by Wagner, Richard Wagner, who associated certain themes with characters in his operas. But maybe not even just characters, but the emotion or the feeling of love or the feeling of something that then when you hear the motif, oh, this is something. Or, if you hear it in the horns and you realize, oh, the hero is on its way. These sort of things that come back and forth, which is reused in different parts, in different contexts, which now we actually hear a lot in film. If you watch The Lord of the Rings, for example, the Shire theme, you have the Hobbits theme, the Elven, the all these things, now it's so instinctive. But I think back then it wasn't so.
Yeah, it's become almost like a signature musical call or musical, just musical tune, which represents either a character or a situation or a conflict or place even for the film. And I dare say that a lot of film music was originated in the opera or theater play, because that's where the music really played that role of supporting on the emotional and auditory level, supporting the actual story which was unfolding on stage, either in theater more of narration and in opera more in the singing. But even the opera is not confined to what we might think today of an opera, because it went through huge evolution of the genre and style, and often included a lot of just spoken narration. So there's a lot of connection with the film and modern ways of using the music for the storytelling. And with Beethoven, I think Larry really hit the nail in the head when he is pointing out how that three short notes followed by the longer note, small rhythmical segment becomes a rhythmical leitmotif of the entire symphony, and it's present in every single movement of that symphony. And if we really listen to that, it's not just a call reminder. Okay, we have the ringtone on our phone for this aunt from France. It's not only that. However, it does play that role, but not only that, it also changes from movement to movement. That da-da-da-dum thing becomes sometimes ascending and joyful, sometimes mysterious, sometimes much slower or faster in different color keys and different instruments. So that is definitely an unfolding story on its own. Probably if, in terms of Wagner or Lord of the Rings, that might represent the main character of the story. Would you say?
Yeah, that's a really cool, really interesting way of putting it. I have two thoughts about it. The first is totally in agreement with you in that it represents a character, it represents maybe a hero or the main antagonist or the protagonist in a story, and we see how it develops. We see how when you hear this leitmotif come back, you recognize it immediately. You recognize the feeling of it. You recognize the way that it should make you feel inside. And it's almost like when you have a villain in a movie and you just when you thought they've hidden away or they run away from the villain, and the villain comes back, or and the villain is more evil than before, or has more powers potentially, right? So I think there's definitely that, but I also believe it's so relevant in our life when we use fragments and we relate that idea more philosophically to our lives. We start off as something very small, singular cell or two cell, and then we grow, and these are the things that start us off. The life starts very small, and then we grow, and little steps make bigger things, and yet we're always sort of the same. The essence of us is the same, but there's so many different ways. He goes from, I love this quote which he uses, which is Beethoven pushed himself to compose more of this material instead of keeping to the standard structure. So he decides, okay, this is who I am. Let's say the rhythmic motif, bum, 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 is me. And should I stick to the normal way of how people should live their lives? No, let's do something else with it. Let's, expand on that. Let's expand the boundaries. And so I see what you're saying as not only just sort of the rhythmic fragment as a leitmotif that represents characters, but also in terms of personally, as we go through this journey of the symphony, we feel like, oh, there's all these seeds that are planted, and then they grow into a small woods in a forest, and it grows and it represents our lives. I think that's why Beethoven's music, especially when you philosophize it or anthropomorphize it, it becomes very relatable. It becomes a part of the human experience. So yeah.
That's an extremely good way to put this. It's very relatable. Beethoven's music is
very relatable.
It seems so simple and so just matter of fact. You start listening it and you just get into it. seemingly easily. And Larry really is taking a deep look into what Beethoven did to make it so. And I also wanted to reflect on your comment about the villain in the symphony and that leitmotif.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I
you
mean,
know,
it could be a villain. It
yeah.
doesn't, I'm not sure. What do you think?
Well, actually, it's a lot of people agree with you that it could be a villain, and there was even a whole theory or conspiracy theory, I don't know, that that particular leitmotif in Beethoven's intention was meant to mean a knock on the door by the fate.
Yes.
Some
Yeah.
people dug out some hints to that from his diaries and his letters. It's not confirmed, so that's probably why Larry is not bringing this up. I'm sure he's aware of that theory, but for many musicians, this is a fundamental, meaningful approach to Beethoven's music, even in general, because Beethoven used that particular rhythm in many other compositions, and so people who adhere to that theory, they see that as that fate knocking on a person's door, appearing again and again in different settings.
Yeah, I love this because even if you look at the older stories, whether it is in the biblical stories or the stories of the Torah, and you go through them, there's always these sort of ways in which the storytellers would use tropes or ideas or certain characters or certain images that represent things, so that when you see these happen again and again, you understand that no, this is the storyteller reminding you of a certain thing. It's for example, to talk about a very biblical sense, when the cloud is following the Israelites, it represents there's a cloud covering, and then there's a cloud covering the mountains, and that's when God speaks. This idea of the cloud, and it goes around, and later when in the New Testament, when there's a cloud again and God is speaking again. So there's this idea that we're using natural motives to represent ideas and represent certain characters and certain people and certain notions, right?
Yeah,
and then this is sort of very what we hear in the music, where we hear this again.
Yeah, that's right. Writers of literature and research and whatnot very commonly use the symbolism. So
absolutely, that's the word I wanted to use.
To represent a certain idea, which of course evokes imagination in the reader and all of that. And it's like a staple, standard way of communicating the idea through an image, through sometimes visual image, sometimes concept, sometimes even a few words, like so composers do that too, and they always did in Renaissance, and in the Baroque time.
The Dies Irae, right?
Exactly.
Coming in through things like that, right? I think that's super fascinating. I really love that.
It's very fascinating, and Beethoven really didn't hide it. He actually put it in the forefront here, and that's what Larry is pointing out in his description when he draws our attention to da 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 dum da 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 da. It goes up. It seems like maybe it's not, maybe yes. So, but it is comprised of the same rhythmic leitmotif.
Yeah. I think this is really cool in music, because in literature, it's more specific, I guess. But in music, it could be fate knocking. It could be the announcement of something. It could be a call to battle. It allows the listener, the audience, to form their own nuance within what it is, because he doesn't put words to it. I mean, unless it's a song or a lieder, then there's maybe perhaps, but it's not specific, which allows for us to still follow the story but have our own. It's relatable that way. We can actually put ourselves into it too, whether it's the hero or the villain, whether it is the fate or something different.
It is whatever you decide it is for you today. And,
and it grows on you, right?
Exactly, and you're absolutely right. That's what makes the music so relatable, because it allows room for personal interpretation without clashing with what Beethoven meant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is a wonderful way to put that, and it does make music so relatable to everyone, because it really provides room for forming our own imagination, being part of that story in a more intimate way.
Yeah, and I think it's important to address this now because when, part 7, we are in the third movement, almost at the fourth movement. And now it's sort of becoming very obvious to us that there are certain things that Beethoven's using to draw this music. It's every movement's a blockbuster. But he ties it all together, with a certain stamp of what this piece is about. And I think that's just absolutely brilliant. And I want to thank the team and the collaborators for highlighting this to us, from new media productions, virtual concert halls, architects of music, and of course the amazing narrator, Lawrence Rapchak. This is just a wonderful way for me to learn more and to delve deeper into this kind of music, as well as the great composer, Beethoven.
Yeah, and I want to point out that the Architect of Music is a wonderful company which produces very focused programs focused on the architecture of music. And please take a couple of minutes to check out their YouTube channel. You will see not only Beethoven, there's more in there. Also, I wanted to mention that for our current and future events, and we have a lot of events happening this season and already planning the next season, please don't hesitate to visit our website, soundespressivocompetition.com or progressivemusicians.com, colorchestra.com, to learn more about our company productions, both in live virtual shows as well as video documentaries and film. Please visit virtualconcerthalls.com and many of our channels on various platforms.
Yeah, we are just at the beginning of our wonderful season ahead. We have many amazing things up ahead. November has been incredible for us so far, and we look forward to many incredible things in the future. Thank you, Anna, for joining us. And with that, we'll see you for part 8 of our amazing Beethoven 5 documentary series. And of course, a big hand to our team and everyone who made all this happen. And with that, we'll see you next time. Thank you again. See you.
No matter where you are or who you are, music connects us all. We started with a dream, but now we are paving the future. Welcome to the Sound Espressiva Global Competition. Fully virtual, yet bringing musicians closer together than ever before, now on a global scale. True live, inclusivity, diversity, connection, community, an extraordinary array of judges. Get noticed by companies all over the world. Prizes, scholarships, performance opportunities. Apply to be a part of the most exciting congregation of artists like nothing you've ever seen before. We guarantee quality and leave no musician behind. We can't wait to hear you on the virtual stage.